America, and it's just great that you guys are taking an hour out to spend with me and my friends. We're going to have an amazing show. Just want to wait for a few more people to enter the room. I know people are parking. There could be traffic. Okay. All right. We have a really special show for you guys. Not only are there 4 fantastic storytellers here, but we've got an after show that is going to just kick butt. So after this hour of power, you might want to stick around for a lot of fun, and I'll tell you about that in just a minute. Just so you know, you guys, you can find the first 3 hour of powers on YouTube. And if you need any more information, of course, go to storyworthypodcast.com. That would be ground control. Yeah, right there. By the way, you guys, this Tuesday on the podcast coming up is comedian Chris Duffy. And he's a funny guy. Yeah, you know him, Joel? I'm excited. Yeah, he's a great guy. His story is about taking a tour through the Celestial Seasonings Tea Factory in Boulder, Colorado.
That's a sexy story.
Yeah, it's just one of those factory stories that is so hilarious. It's just one of those, it's like a factory story going, super funny. I love the doorbell, by the way. Exciting, the doorbell. This doorbell, do you remember back in the 80s when they came up with those musical doorbells? People had like the ding, 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 or it would play a song, or like at Christmas time, it would do jingle bells. God, wouldn't it be nice if life was that simple again? That would be the most exciting thing going on. Anyway, you guys, we're going to have a great night, and we're going to kick it off with one of the, just a really amazing talent, you guys. He's been on the Storyworthy podcast. He's judged the game show Story Smash, and here he is on the Storyworthy Hour of Power. He's got a new book out, you guys. It came out last summer, I believe, or last fall, and it's called In Defense of Elitism, Why I'm Better Than You, and You're Better Than Someone Who Didn't Buy This Book. Joel has also been seen on Real Time with Bill Maher. He's been seen on The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, Conan, Politicking with my boyfriend Larry King. And he's here right now, you guys, to entertain you guys. So please put your hands together for my friend Joel Stein.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. This means a lot. I just want to thank you for creating this space. I think in these times, it's super important that you're giving white people a place to tell their stories. So I just want to applaud you for that. It's important work, and you're doing it. So, okay, here's my story is when my wife was pregnant and we found out we were having a boy, I freaked out because, as you can tell, I'm not capable of raising a male child. So I went out and tried to learn how to be a man. I did all kinds. I joined the Boy Scouts and got my first Boy Scout badge. I did all kinds of things, and then I called the Department of Defense and I asked them if they would let me do some like basic training stuff. And to my shock, they responded, and they had all 4 branches of the military compete to make me an offer. And the Army, which is a very competitive branch of the military, a 3-star general emailed me, and he used emoticons, which made me feel like the Army was going to be my place to go. And he said, if you join us for 3 days of boot camp in Fort Knox, we'll let you fire a tank, which they had never let a civilian do for very good reason. And so I decided to go to Fort Knox. And I was very nervous. I was, in my late 30s. I wasn't in any kind of shape to be doing basic training. I tried to get myself in as good a shape as possible. I went to a hotel in Fort Knox on the base the night before. Super, super nervous. Couldn't really fall asleep till 2, and I had to be there at 5. So I got a couple hours sleep. I show up at Fort Knox, and I joined the rest of these like basically 18-year-olds who show up, and they yell at us, and they shave our heads, and they give me a uniform, and this captain and these 2 sergeants are just yelling at me that I'm not putting on my uniform right. It's very stressful. That's one thing they don't talk too much about the Army. A lot of yelling, not a lot of please, and I was doing everything wrong. I was buckling things wrong and tying things wrong. And then they took me alone away from the rest of the troop to learn about the tanks that I'd be shooting later. They were very concerned that I'd screw up this tank thing. And I had called the comedian Rob Riggle before I left to ask him for any advice, because he had served in the Marines. And he said, just hydrate, whatever you do. You don't want to be the guy who has some kind of heat incident, and then they put you in a kiddie pool full of ice cold water and give you the silver bullet, which is when they put a thermometer up your butt. This is just one more year of military service. So I went, before I was going to do any of the actual 3 days of training, they wanted me to learn about tanks. So I went with the tank guys, and it's like 90 degrees out. They gave me this MRE, which is this meals ready to eat, which was this cold, gloopy chicken fajita, because I couldn't even heat it up. And I kind of tried to get that down. And then before I go do any kind of exercise or work, I just have to go listen to these guys tell me about tanks. So I'm trying to remember whether to say yes, sir, because I get yelled at if I get any of this wrong, or yes, captain, or yes, drill sergeant. And I'm standing there trying to take in all this information about mechanical tank stuff that I can't follow. And it's 90 degrees, and I'm wearing this uniform, and I'm trying to pay attention. And then I apparently sit down by a tree, which I didn't remember doing. And it turns out that within 3 hours of being in basic training, before I'd done anything, I fainted, which I'd never fainted before in my life. And so I really didn't know what it was. Things had gotten kind of bright. And the next thing I knew, I had chosen to sit down by a tree. And then the whole demeanor of the Army changes when you faint. So I highly recommend fainting immediately, because they took me to a separate room that was air conditioned, and they gave me Pedialyte, which didn't make me feel as manly as I'd hoped to during this whole thing. And I drank the Pedialyte, and they told me, and all I could think was, oh my God, I have to convince them not to give me the silver bullet, because I knew that was the next step. And they told me they were going to take me to the hospital, as they do when people faint. And I felt awful. I was shivering. I told them I was fine. I'd never fainted before. They kept assuring me that people faint all the time. They kept saying I'd locked my knees, which is what they tell people to make them feel better after they faint, as if people don't lock their knees all the time and don't faint. And so I realized they said it's all over. You can't do basic training. You can watch people do basic training. And I realized that if this was true about me, I couldn't raise a son. That I'm not going to be able to go camping with him. I'm incapable of doing anything with my son. So I begged them to let me continue with my day of basic training and not give me the silver bullet. And they kind of, you can't really negotiate with the Army that well, but I gave it my best shot, and they agreed to let me do the rest of the day, despite the fact that I fainted, and not tell any of my fellow soldiers that I had fainted. So I am eternally grateful for the Army for keeping this quiet, and I'm a little embarrassed that I told you. Thank you for letting me embarrass myself on your story, Christine, on your show.
Yay, Joel Stein. That was fantastic. That is amazing. By the way, I think you are a manly man. That's all I'm saying, for sure. And you don't live far from me, Joel, so maybe I'll come up and we'll take a walk sometime. We'll take a hike.
You made it sound threatening.
Well, I just want to see, how good a shape you're in. I just want to see how manly you are.
Yeah, no, I can hike still. Yeah.
I'm so glad. Hey, man, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. Thank you. You guys can go back in the Storyworthy podcast catalog and find Joel's story that he told on the podcast. He's just such a funny guy. Always brings something to the table. And also, really, check out his book, In Defense of Elitism. It's just great. It really is. And I like the look of your website, Joel. I may add that, please. Listen, you guys, last week, and I think even the week before, I told stories about being a flight attendant. And, there are so many stories. There really are. And basically, though, I highlight 3 of them. I could probably do a few more than that, but it's just, it was a big part of my life over 7 years. And the entire 7 years I flew, I never had a schedule. Like I never knew when I was going to fly. So I had to carry a beeper. You guys might remember a beeper. And it'd be like, I'd be on my way to see Pretty Woman at the movie theater. And then all of a sudden my beeper would go off and I'd look down, I'd see it was scheduling. I'd have to find a payphone. I'd have to call scheduling and they'd say, oh no, Miss Blackburn, you're not going to see Pretty Woman. You're going to Cleveland, that state known as that mistake on the lake. So one afternoon, it's Sunday, and some friends of mine asked me to go see the Pittsburgh Steelers in Three Rivers Stadium. And in fact, they're playing the Cleveland Browns. And we were a huge rival with Cleveland. I don't know if you guys remember the NFL back in the 70s, but it was a big deal. And like growing up in my house, my father watched the Steelers every single game. He'd have a slipper in his hand, and if the near perfect quarterback, Terry Bradshaw, made like the slightest mistake, my father would take that slipper and he'd throw it at the screen. You idiot, Bradshaw. They were good days. But anyway, I still always went to Steeler games, and it was, a big thing, especially growing up in Pittsburgh. So one Sunday afternoon, like I said, my friends invited me to the game, but I'm on my beeper. I'm still working. But I get off at 3 o'clock p.m. And scheduling usually didn't call like within a 2-hour window. So I take the chance and I go to the game with my friends. Now we're in the parking lot, tailgating, drinking Iron City beer. It was a beautiful day. Then we're in the stadium, and it's just such a great day. Quarterback Bubby Brister is throwing long passes down the field, and my friends are passing more Iron City beer. The offensive line looks good, and the steel curtain, the defensive line, the steel curtain, they looked great. It was just a blast. And then all of a sudden, beep, 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 beep. You know it. Of course, my beeper went off. But don't worry, you guys, I have a plan. You see, my plan is that I am going to find some place to call scheduling back. Yeah, I'll call back and I'll call in sick. I just need to find a quiet place to do it. So I take the escalators in the stadium down, down, down to the bowels of Three Rivers Stadium. I get to the bottom of the last escalator. I look around, nobody's around. Perfect. Then I see a telephone, a payphone on the wall. It's like sent from God. And I run over to it, and I pick up the phone, and I dial as fast as I can. Yeah, hello, this is Christine Blackburn, employee 3846L. And my beeper just went off, and I cannot fly. I can't fly. I have a cold. She's totally buying it. Yeah, I've had it for like a weekend. And then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see this guy running towards me with half his face painted black and half his face painted gold. He grabs the telephone out of my hand and screams into the receiver, "Go Steelers! The Browns suck!" I get back on the phone and the scheduler says, "Miss Blackburn, you have 1 hour to get to the airport." So I run out of Three Rivers Stadium. I run all the way through the parking lot. I get to my Nissan Pulsar, the one with the T-tops. And I always have my uniform and a suitcase packed. So now I'm in the front seat of the Pulsar, and I am in my underwear. And now I'm trying to get on the navy pantyhose, and then you have to find like the seam and the crotch. And then I'm trying to pull on this wool skirt, button up this double-breasted blazer and the polyester shirt and the tie, and I check myself in the rear view mirror to make sure my hair looks okay and my makeup, and then I straighten my wings because I'm a safety professional, and then I drive as fast as I can to the Pittsburgh International Airport. And by the time I get on the plane, you guys, I have 2 minutes to spare. Yeah, I was really getting there fast. And as I'm putting away my overhead bag in my suitcase in the overhead compartment, I realize that the passengers are staring at me like with daggers in their eyes. I get it. See, they think that I'm the reason why they're late. Yeah. So I want to say to them, "Oh no, folks, I'm not the reason why you're late. You're late because another flight attendant called in sick. Yeah, in fact, I'm the reason why you're going to take off at all. Just over an hour ago, I was in Three River Stadium watching the Steelers play the Browns, and now I'm here. So a little gratitude, a little thanks. But of course, I don't say that. I say, nice to see you. We'll be taking off shortly. Hello, nice to see you. I say hello to the pilots and the other flight attendants, and then I take my seat in the front of the plane. Now, my jump seat happens to be facing straight down the aisle of the plane, so all the passengers are still staring at me with their dagger eyes. But I'm looking right back at them because, let's face it, nobody wants to be here. And finally, we take off down the runway. Now, as soon as the plane gets pretty fast, maybe over 120 miles an hour, as soon as the nose lifts up, I hear a loud bang, and the plane just sucks back. And my first thought is, oh my God, we just lost an engine. And then I thought, I can't believe I was in Three River Stadium an hour ago watching the Steelers play the Browns, and now I'm going to be in an airplane accident taking these people to Orlando? Another jolt brings me back to reality, and I look at the passengers, and now their dagger eyes have turned to puppy eyes. What do you know? I reach for the phone behind my head, and I call the cockpit, but they don't answer. The flight attendant beside me, she's looking through her emergency manual like she's looking at like IKEA instructions. And the flight attendants in the back of the plane, they're not coming forward. Nobody is taking charge. So like the quarterback Bubby Brister of this goddamn airplane, I take off my seatbelt and I adjust my jacket and I straighten out my wings and I head back into coach to take care of the passengers. Oh, hi, everybody. Hello again. Seems like we might have just lost an engine. Whoops, they might not have known that. No, folks, it's okay. We've got 3 engines. We can easily fly on 2. Really? They're not buying it. You guys, this is a Boeing. And I always say, if it's not Boeing, I'm not going. Am I right? They're not laughing. Finally, thankfully, the pilot comes on the PA. He says, well, folks, looks like we lost the number 2 engine. We'll go ahead and circle the airport and wait until the fire trucks arrived, and then we'll attempt the landing. You see, folks, we're just going to circle around the airport for a while and wait for the fire trucks to arrive. Wait a minute. What fire trucks? I look out the window and I realize what everybody sees, what I see, and what we all see is that it looks like there are tiny bits of metal flying out of the number 2 engine. It looks a bit like fairy dust. It's kind of sparkly, but it's actually an engine. And finally, the captain comes back on and he says, flight attendants, take your seat. I take my seat back in the front of the airplane in my jump seat, still looking at the passengers down the aisle. But now they've softened a bit, and I think that they realize we're all in this together. And then we do land safely, thank goodness. And all the passengers burst into applause, and I applaud, and I bow, and I say thank you, like I did something right. And then, as we're taxiing into we landed way out in the field or something, and we're taxiing in, and then we finally get to a place we're going to let everybody off, and the buses are going to come and they're going to take the people, and so the people are coming forward, and I say thank you, it was nice being in this emergency situation with you, please come back and fly with us again. And then my beeper goes off again, and I go into the airport and I call scheduling, and they tell me that I'm off for the day. And as I'm dragging my suitcase through the airport, this suitcase that I have carried and dragged 1,000 times has never felt heavier. And just when I think I can't walk anymore, I stop and I look up and I realize that I am underneath a Friday's restaurant. And inside on the big screen TV, Bubby Brister and the Pittsburgh Steelers are still playing football. So what do? Well, I take off my double-breasted blazer. I unbutton my scratchy polyester blouse. I order an Iron City beer. And I finish watching the Steelers beat the Browns. And guess what? That guy was right. The Browns suck. We beat them 27-24. Yay! Thank you. Thank you. All right. Oh man, if you're from Pittsburgh or Cleveland, that story definitely rings familiar for sure. So thanks for listening, you guys. All right, you guys, this next person coming to the stage, she's a comedian, and she got her first big break. I'm not kidding. When she was 11 months old, she was plucked off the streets to become the Gerber baby. Yeah, that's right. She was the Gerber baby. And only a month later, she lost her job because she was too old. That's exactly right. You guys, this girl has written and produced hundreds of hours of television, including shows for Disney, GSN, Fox, HGTV, Lifetime, NBC, and CBS. Please welcome my friend, Jennifer Vally.
Woo! Hey, everybody, Jennifer Vally's here. Woo!
Hey.
Very high tech with the Zoom, but in my story, it's going to be some low tech because I'm going to show you some pictures, okay?
Yay.
So I'm just going to say right up front, Black Lives Matter. Can we clap for that? And also, I'm just going to say it. I don't care what my high school Facebook friends think. I am Antifa. Who's with me? Anybody else Antifa? I don't know if you know what yesterday was. Yesterday was D-Day, the 76th anniversary of D-Day. And that is when the Allied and American forces defeated the Nazis, the fascist regime. So everybody should be Antifa. I can't even say it right. Antifa. Am I right? Let me hear it from my auntie. I don't know how Antifa got perverted into some kind of left-wing extremist group. But anyway, my story has a little bit to do with D-Day. I don't have a relative who was a brave soldier that fought. I'm going to tell you a story about my family who lived through an occupied country during World War II. My mother, my grandmother, and my aunt lived in occupied the Netherlands during World War II. So I don't know if you guys know a lot about the Dutch, but the Dutch the whole thing is like live and let live, we let people do their own thing. So when World War II first started, they were very neutral because in World War I, it worked. It was like, oh, we're not going to get involved. And literally the war was completely around the Netherlands. This case, it wasn't so much so because the Germans wanted to get the Netherlands, so they'd have a water port to get over to England. So May 10th, it's going to be like a history lesson. It'll be fun, though, in a way. So May 10th, 1940, the Germans invaded the Netherlands. They gave the Queen and the government till the 14th to just give up and let them occupy it. Well, they didn't answer the cue, and this is what happened on May 14th. The Germans bombed a city called Rotterdam. And in that day, that started the Dutch in World War II. 80,000 people were displaced, 10,000 people were killed, 10,000 buildings destroyed. Anyway, so and the Queen, listen to this, and the Queen and all the government, they fled, like immediately. They left. It's like, hey, we're going to go to England, we're going to go to Canada, but good luck, Dutch people. So it's pretty fun. So they took over. So slowly at first, when the war was first started going on, the Nazis came in and they took over every building. They took over every government building. If they liked a business, they would kick the people out. If they liked a house, they would kick them out. So my mom she was divorced from my grandpa. She was just living in this house with my aunt and my mother. And what did my aunt do for a living? My grandma do for a living? Well, she was the voice of Radio Free Europe. Here's her picture. Can you see her? There she is in the middle. I told you it's low tech. Anyway, they were reporting the news, and they actually got to report the news from the 10th, when the Germans first came in, till they actually bombed Rotterdam. So for those from the 10th to the 13th, they got to get news out to the Dutch people. But then the Nazis came in, and because they got a heads up that they were coming to the radio station, my grandmother and their co-workers, they tried to destroy all the radio equipment. Well, they were a little late. They came in, they fixed the equipment, and for the rest of the war, they used the radio station as a propaganda station for the Nazis. So my grandmother was out of work, so she needed to make money. So what she would do is she grew tobacco. I know it sounds weird, but tobacco is really, a valuable commodity. So she would grow it in the garden and then hang it on wires through the house. So during the whole war, my mother lived in a house with, tobacco leaves drying. And you could dry them, you could roll them into cigarettes, you could trade them for food and goods, you could, get money sometimes. Pretty cool, right? So people are resourceful, the Dutch are resourceful. So my aunt, who's about 7 years older, here she is, she looks like Grace Kelly. That's a hot fucking piece of Dutch ass right there. Yeah, that's Tante Emmy. She just passed at 96. Look how fucking hot she is. Anyway, when she was 17, she left the house and she moved to the country with her boyfriend and a couple of friends. They were hiding out on a farm. And what was nice about that is on the farm, they killed a cow, they would have food. And Tante Emmy would put it in a basket, and she would ride her bike. This is riding a bike, even though this is actually riding a bike, but you can't see my legs. So she would ride a bike right up to the Nazi stop, and she would just smile, speak German. They'd let her right through. They never looked in her basket. She was bringing in contraband food. She was bringing in all kinds of shit. Now, my grandfather owned a vacuum cleaner shop, but he also had a resistance meeting underneath. Now, it's not like, he ran the resistance. No, there was like hundreds of resistance groups, but there's no good communication. So, that was like everywhere. One day, in the morning, they found an SS soldier floating in the canal. So they weren't too happy about that. So they rounded up about 8 or 9 people that they thought were in the resistance, young men, put them up against a wall. My mother was in school. They took her and her classmates out and shot all these guys and said, tell your parents what we do to resistors. They left them there all day. So when she was done from school, she had to come out and she had to walk by them. And the families and friends of these people couldn't come back and get the bodies till like the sun went down. And some of them were still alive. It's like, it was fucking crazy, right? So it got worse in 1942. Before that, Jewish people were allowed to kind of work, but my mom noticed that people would start disappearing. They did it slowly at first. So you didn't know if people were just immigrating, getting out of the country, or what happened to them. So my mom had a friend. Her name was Esther. She was a Jewish girl. There she is. That's like the only picture. It's my mom. Anyway, in 1942, the government made Jewish people wear a star on their clothing whenever they went outside so they could be identified. Well, my mother would play with Esther every day. They were friends. They would play every day. Well, one day they were playing and it was cold. Esther asked my mom, do you want to put my sweater on? And she goes, yeah, I would actually. Put it on. And my mother's wearing the sweater with a star on it. So an officer sees this and he is furious. He takes the sweater off and goes, don't put that dirty sweater on. Throws it back to Esther, tells Esther to go home. The next day, my mom hears that they came and they took Esther and her whole family. She was so mad and furious that she ran through the streets of Amsterdam, pulling down posters, propaganda posters from the SS and the Nazis. She was immediately picked up. Sorry, I got a dry mouth. She was immediately picked up by an officer and taken to a local jail. Now, in that jail cell with her were 3 gentlemen that had instruments. They had violins and a viola and a cello, and they were in there because they were arrested because they wanted them to play for the Nazis. They wanted them to play for a concert. I guess they were well known. My mother was hysterical. She was crying, and they played the music to calm her down. And my mother, Olga, she told that story to my daughter. And my daughter wrote a play about it when she was like 11 years old, called Olga's Odyssey. And it's like about the whole thing. She changed it a bit. She in the jail cell, in my daughter's version, the musicians lulled the guards to sleep, you know, like, and then they, like Pirates of the Caribbean, I don't know. And then she took the keys and helped everybody escape. In real life, my grandfather came to get my mother, and she was furious because you're in the resistance. You don't want the SS to know who you are. Oh God, this story's sad, huh? Oh God, I'm sorry. It's about resilience. Okay, so in 1944, this was after D-Day. The Dutch were still occupied. They were occupied all the way to 1945. So the Germans were fucking freaking out, man. So they called it the Hunger Winter. So they starved the Dutch all of 1944. And they didn't give them oil for heat. So people were like tearing down their houses, burning furniture. My mother learned this trick that she used till the day she died, was that she could faint on cue. So she would wait in a food line and she would faint, and then they would move her to the front of the line. So that was her trick to get, and even now, if she, like, I take her to brunch and she's not happy, she'll just faint. So it works both ways. But then they were liberated and all was good. Yay, yay, America, yay, Allied forces. It was all good. And now you gotta love the Dutch, right? Because I've been there a ton of times. I still have relatives there. And what I love is that they're very open-minded. Drugs are legal there. Prostitution is legal there. Assisted suicide is legal there. Gay marriage is legal there. Last time I was there, I was crossing the street, and an officer stops me, and he wants to give me a ticket for jaywalking. I'm like, Jesus, I'm trying to think quick. I'm like, hey, officer, I'm just crossing the street to give my mother, the whore, her daily fix of heroin. He said, stop the Girl Scout and take the ticket like a Dutchman. So anyway, with this Black Lives Matter thing, I don't know if you guys saw, but Amsterdam had a huge Black Lives Matters rally the other day. They had like almost 1 million people in the streets. And I'm thinking, yay, my Dutch people. Well, my cousin in the Netherlands, he calls me and he goes, Jennifer, I just wanted to tell you, Black Lives Matter, but we got to cancel something. And I'm like, cancel something? And he goes, yes, Zwarte Piet. I'm like, what? So if you don't know Dutch, we have a Sinterklaas, like Santa Claus, and like here we have elves. His helper was this guy called Zwarte Piet. And he's his helper. And my mom always told me he had a black face because he went down the chimney and cleaned it first. Well, no, my cousin sent me the picture. Oh, Jesus Christ. That's right. The Dutch do blackface. I'm so humiliated. Oh, my God. I thought they were cool, but they're not. So I'm sorry, Dutch people. We have to cancel Zwarte Piet. All right, everybody. That's me. I'm Antifa and Black Lives Matter.
Jennifer, Vally, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Really, that was a great story. Jennifer does have stories that aren't quite as serious. For instance, when she came on Storyworthy, she told a story about trying to save money, so she went to Tijuana for some dental work. Yeah, Tijuana dental work, ladies and gentlemen. All right, you guys, this next guy coming to the stage, he is an office drone by day and a comedian by night. He's performed at the Ontario Improv, the Greensboro Comedy Zone, and at the 2019 Charm City Comedy Festival. Plus, he was in the United States Marine Corps, and he's one of my newest friends, and I know you're going to love him. You guys put your hands together for Jacob Rosalez.
Hey, all right. Okay. Hey, wow. Oh boy, old Zoom time. And everything's on Zoom now. It's so confusing now, you know. I got comedy on Zoom, I got work on Zoom, I'm dating on Zoom. It's a bloody blur. Really it is. It's crazy. I mean, I was just oh man, I got audio issues. System. There we go. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I swear, like I'm like my grandpa trying to get help with this stuff. It's nuts. It's such a bother. Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna regale about. I got some stories about growing up in old Michigan. Yeah. Oh, how I wish again I was in Michigan, back on the farm. It was. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember in the '80s, the state board of tourism, they came up with this catchy slogan to get people to go visit. It was, yes, Michigan, the feelings forever. The commercials, yes, Michigan, the feelings forever. And it was so hokey and so just pleasant 80s hokiness. They've improved it now, which is good because, I mean, back then they had record levels of unemployment. So I don't know if that's a feeling that you really want to have forever or not. But they're improving it now. They're saying pure Michigan. That's right. Yeah, economic instability, pure Michigan. Yeah, you got the water crisis in Flint. Okay, I guess pure Michigan. Yeah. Oh, armed protest at the state capitol with AR-15s. Yeah, that's that definitely pure Michigan. It's great. But I think, like, for me, growing up, I grew up in a very small rural farming community, Hart, Michigan. My dad, he's from a Mexican migrant farm working family. And back in the 60s, they decided, hey, we're going to come move to Hart, Michigan and plant roots here. My mom, she's from a stereotypical white family, hodgepodge of European ancestry. Hart, Michigan. It was nice. It was nice. Go to my Mexican grandparents' farm. The adults, they drink out of mason jars. Yeah, I'm still doing it. And the kids, they go in the backyard. They got the water hose. And that's how they rolled. Go to grandma's farm, and it's, stereotypical Mexican family, 30 cousins there, just having a blast, playing on the farm equipment, going into the barn, and just having fun, totally unsupervised, because that's how we rolled back then. My God, yeah, and I remember throwing rocks at the cows. You get the rocks, you throw them at the cows, they'd charge the electric fence and get zapped, and you'd have that one cousin that would always just pull out his penis and just piss on the electric fence. It was so fun. Yeah. And I'm in kindergarten, and I'm getting Daisy air rifles, the old Daisy Red Ryder BB gun in kindergarten before I learned how to even write my own name. Didn't get the compass with the stock in it though. My parents weren't that, they were kind of cheap. But it was nice, My brother and I would go in the backyard. We'd shoot up Dad's empty beer bottles, the Strohs from Detroit. Shoot them up with the BB gun. We ran out of those. We'd say, hey, let's have a BB gun fight. Why not? We're going to become lifelong members of the NRA sometime, so let's do that. Eventually, Mom would take the BB guns from us, and we'd have to find something even more dangerous to play with. So, let's pull out the lawn darts and play dodge, because that's pure Michigan right there in a nutshell. Yeah. But they had floods. They had floods this year in Michigan, just a couple weeks ago. Big old floods. And I'm talking to friends and family on the phone. And they're just like, do you remember the floods of '86? It's almost as bad as the floods of '86. Remember that 12 News came to town. The National Guard got deployed. That was something. And I'm like, yeah, I remember the floods of '86. 24/7 coverage, 12 News. They had to cancel Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends for the floods of '86. You bet your ass I remember it. But one thing, like with my white grandparents, I remember, this was great. Saturday nights in Hart. This was the culture on a Saturday night in Hart, Michigan. Different than in LA. On a Saturday night in LA, you'll take your kids to something really cultured. Maybe the Hollywood Bowl. Maybe it's the KCRW World Music Fest. But on a Saturday night in Hart, Michigan, you go to Grandma's. She's playing the Lawrence Welk Show. There's some classic polkas on. She's got a venison roast in the oven. And you play a game of cribbage. Just a nice, fun game of cribbage. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I get dealt, I'm 7 years old, and I get dealt a perfect hand. That's right. A score of 29 in the game of cribbage. 3 5s and a jack. And then the cut card is a 5. I don't know what to make of it. I break a cardinal sin in cribbage. Cardinal rule, you don't show your opponent your hand, but I have to, because I don't know what to do. I don't know what cards to get rid of. I said, Grandma, what do I do with this? And she looks at it, and she says, my God, I think you have a perfect hand. That could be 29 big ones, 29 points. And she says, I'm going to get the camera out. It was a Kodak moment. That's a Kodak moment in Hart, Michigan on a Saturday night. It's not like you're in West Hollywood. West Hollywood Kodak moments are, you got your girlfriend there, she's an Instagram influencer. She's shaking her ass in front of the pink wall on Melrose. Or there's graffiti angel wings, and you do a couple's photo next to it. Or you do the heart sign with your hand. That's a Kodak moment nowadays. But 1986 in Hart, Michigan. A perfect hand in cribbage. That's the Kodak moment. She busts out the Kodak Instamatic camera with the flash cube. The disposable flash cube. It's disposable. It's responsible for the high mercury levels in the Great Lakes area and the rivers there. And she snaps that picture of my fat ass with that perfect hand. And she says, well, it's going to take a couple of months because the Ben Franklin is pretty busy now, because that's the only place in town that can develop films is the Ben Franklin 5 a dime. You go there, you look at some fabric, you get your film developed. Maybe you get some snacks, some Werther's Originals. This gets even better, though. It's beyond that, because when she gets the film developed, what does she do with it? By God, she submits it to the Oceana County Herald Journal. The big paper in the county. It didn't make it to the Muskegon Times. I was a little disappointed about that. But Oceana Herald Journal, they put it on page 4, next to the obituaries and the police spotter. My fat ass with that perfect hand. And it's this local boy gets a perfect hand in cribbage. And that's when I knew I'm destined for nothing. This is as good as it fucking gets. That's, they say no ink is bad ink is good ink, but this is horrible ink. Oh, yeah. Eventually we moved out of that small town, moved to Midland, Michigan. I was amazed. 40,000 people. They had Kmart's. They had McDonald's. They had pedestrian crosswalks. When I'm a little fat kid in Hart, Michigan, I would fantasize at school, wondering when am I going to have a sidewalk in front of my house so I could jump my bike off the curb, maybe put a kick-ass bike ramp on there and do some crazy tricks. And then we moved to this budding metropolis of Midland, Michigan. Beautiful, beautiful. Now, fast forward, I'm 13 years old. I tell my father, I'm like, I want to start spending the summers on my Mexican grandparents' farm. I want to spend more time with them. Very culturally enlightening. My Spanish was horrible. It was. And then my grandpa, he teaches me the important words, the important phrases that can really help you get through in life. Chinga tu madre, hijo de puta, and panocha. It was wonderful. They're very, very Catholic. I remember my grandma. She freaked out when she found out I'd never done confession before. She had to tell me my prayers. She was hoping I'd become a priest. Because that way, if I became, and her logic was, Jacob becomes the priest. I die, and then I go to heaven because I taught him his prayers. That's how it worked. It was lovely. My God. Yeah. So I do the confession, and then she says, hey, you're going to do your first Holy Communion. I'm like, I don't want to do it. No, you got to. See, people, I'm 13 years old. I'm 6 foot tall, 220 pounds, and I'm doing a first communion with a bunch of 7-year-old Mexican kids. Yeah, the girls, they had the big puffy dresses on. Grandma gave me a white tuxedo. I looked just like Boss Hogg from the Dukes of Hazzard. It was something. It really was. And then last but not least, in their house, this is how Catholic they were. Every room, every bloody room, bathrooms, hallways, closets, biblical photos and paintings on the wall, white Jesus on the cross, white Jesus wearing a crown of thorns. Yeah, it was nuts. I learned early on when I was 13 years old the importance of masturbating with my eyes closed. That was something. All right, well, I feel good with that. Go to Michigan sometime. Visit. It's pure. It's beautiful. God bless America. These colors don't run.
Wow, Jacob Rosalez. That's great, man. You really paint pictures with your words. That's awesome. I grew up in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, and a lot of that rings true with me. Like not having a sidewalk in front of our house. You know what I mean? Like being sort of rural, and that's awesome. Thank you so much, Jacob. I really appreciate it. Awesome. Hey, you guys, check it out. We have one more fantastic storyteller for you. And then, guess what? We have the after show. And tonight, the after show, guess what's happening? Oh, yeah, we're playing Story Smash. Oh, yes, we are. We're playing Story Smash. As soon as this show is over, we're going to go in and play Story Smash. So if you can stick around, please do. But right now, you guys, please, this is so exciting. I'm super happy she's joining us. Please, you're going to be so excited to see her. She is a writer and a photographer and a headlining comedian all over the country. And she's had a long, extensive career that includes winning Star Search, appearing in Playboy magazine, and she's had several comedy albums. And she has a recent solo show she just recently completed in 2019. I watched it. I love it. It's called The Whole Story, H-O-L-E, The Whole Story. She's fantastic. Please put your hands together for my friend, Felicia Michaels.
Thank you, Christine. Can you hear me? Okay. In the year 2000, I lived in New York City. I had the pleasure of living in New York City for a decade. And I was invited to a Halloween party. And I am notoriously really bad at parties. I can't kiss ass. I get shy. So I have this party trick that I do. I look for someone who no one is talking to, who's kind of sulking off by themselves. And I go up to them and I start a conversation. So in the year 2000, I was invited to this Halloween party by this gentleman called Jerry Red Wilson. And it was in New York City in Stuyvesant Village. And this Halloween party was full of all the alt comics you could imagine seeing that have grown into the most amazing comedians today. And sitting in the corner of this big party was a little old lady who was around, I would say, 90 years old. And so I went over to her because I'm super shy to talk to everybody else, and I started up a conversation with her. And I decided right then and there that I'm going to offer, because she told me that her 2 daughters had died and she was all by herself. I'm going to start taking her to lunch like once a month. That'll be my little nice thing that I do. And so I would go pick her up once a month. This went on for about a year. And we would go to lunch, and sometimes we would grocery shop. She had a little cart, and sometimes I would push the cart or she would push the cart. Sometimes we would push it together, and sometimes even hold hands. And every time we saw each other, she would always tell me about a great adventure that she had when she was 15 years old, around 1925. It turns out that she grew up on the Lower East Side in a tenement, and that she worked in a millinery factory that made like hats. and right around the Triangle Shirt Factory time, around that. And that her favorite thing to do was that her father and her would always go see Mary Pickford movies. And Mary Pickford was America's sweetheart, really the royalty in the show business, America's first movie star. She was an amazing actress, and she married Douglas Fairbanks, another movie star. And that was like her most favorite thing that she would do. And she would explain how intimate and cool it was to go to those movies, how people would play piano along with the movies because they were silent and all this kind of stuff. And then sadly, her father died. And when her father died, her mother made her work even harder and would take all her money. And her mother was a very angry woman because she had to take care of all these kids, right? But every once in a while, Addie would save a penny here, save a penny there, and she would sneak to go look at a Mary Pickford movie. And then one day she got a hair in her bonnet, or a bee in her bonnet, and she decides that what she's going to do is she's going to save her money, hide it from her mother, and she's going to hitchhike across America to go to Hollywood. And so every time we got together, it would be another story about her great adventure going across America. And stories would include selling newspapers in Chicago. If she didn't have money, she would go to small town jails and say, "Please, sir, I'm a lonely girl trying to get to California. May I sleep safely in a jail cell?" And she hitchhiked up Pikes Peak. So every day was a new story. And she told me about arriving in Los Angeles. And I have to tell you, at this point, I thought she was a little bit senile, wasn't really telling the truth about the stories, had inflated their importance, the whole thing, as you do, right, as a younger person when you're around an older person. And then she told me a story about arriving in Los Angeles, and she shows up at the YWCA, which had just opened that week. And by the way, I needed to tell you that when she would save her money to go on this big trip and hitchhike, she would put it in a little hole underneath her bed, and she would secretly buy things for her trip, a walking stick, kind of this old school hitchhiking outfit, you know, that kind of looked like she was riding horse, but it was for hitchhiking and all this kind of stuff. And when she arrived at the YWCA in her little getup, it just so happened that they had opened that week, and there was a reporter and a photographer from the New York Times that had showed up to take a photograph of the YWCA, right? So as she's telling me the story, and then they take the photograph, and I'm like, crazy old lady, right? And then she told me, one of the last stories she told me was the next day she got up and someone told her where she could go find the studio that Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks had. And so she took a trolley to go to the studio, and she went to the studio, and then those days there wasn't a lot of security around the studio, and she just happened to walk into the studio. And she kind of meandered about, and no one said anything to her. And then she saw like a wardrobe barn, a building that was a barn, and she walked in because she didn't know, and she was looking around the wardrobe barn, and that two wardrobe masters, I guess we'll call them, saw her and thought she was actually stealing clothes from the wardrobe barn. So they start chasing her. And so they chase her out of the barn, and they chase her around the movie studio, and they chase her. She sees like a group of people in a circle, and they chase her right in the middle of the circle. And as they chase her into the middle of the circle, they grab her, and a melee breaks out. And the director's like, cut, cut, cut. And what she had actually done is she had run into the filming of a Mary Pickford movie. And so everyone starts like, you know, because the director calls cut, except Mary Pickford puts up her hand, everyone goes quiet, and Mary Pickford finishes the scene. The security guys leave her alone, leave Addie alone. And then after Mary Pickford does this scene, she doesn't break character, everyone applauds, right? And then after the scene, Mary Pickford goes over to Addie and she shakes her hand. And not only that, she introduces Addie to Douglas Fairbanks, right? Now that's a pretty grandiose story. And at the time, you know, like I said, I was like, whatever. And then on the last time that I saw her, her health had been deteriorating and she had been in the hospital for a few weeks. And she had never let me into her house, weirdly. I could see through the door, and it was threadbare but clean. And she finally let me into her house, and she said, my sister died recently, and her daughter sent me a box of things that I had sent my mother, who had never spoken to me since the day I left. And in one of these boxes, I found something, and I want to show you what I found. And she pulls out this folded piece of paper. I can't even believe that it's still held together. And she opens it up. It's a newspaper article. And on this newspaper article is a picture of her in her little hiking uniform in front of the YWCA. And it turns out that whole entire story was true. And I think about her all the time. And I think about her all the time in that I made friends with her out of my comfort zone, and she made friends with me out of her comfort zone. And it was one of the coolest moments in my entire life to know that I held hands with a woman that shook hands with Mary Pickford. That's my story.
That is so cool, man. That's fantastic, Felicia. I love that story. That was just wonderful. Wow, Felicia Michaels, you guys. That was terrific. She, again, please find her film on Amazon called The Whole Story. The Whole Story. I know you're going to like it. That's tremendous. I used to work at Paramount Studios. I gave tours of a lot. And Mary Pickford was very prevalent in those tours because, of course, she and Douglas Fairbanks were both contract players. Rudy Valentino, Clara Bow, you get the picture. Anyway, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Felicia. So, guys, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to wrap up the show because, again, it's the story. We're the hour, and so it's 1 hour long. But if you'd like, please stick around because we're going to be playing Story Smash. And I got to tell you, it's a whole lot of fun. So, you guys, wherever you are, I don't care where you are, put your hands together right now for my amazing guest tonight. Jacob Rosalez, Jennifer Vally, Joel Stein, and the beautiful Felicia Michaels.
Yeah.
Yay!
If you guys have any questions at all, please, right now, put them in the chat box. Put your questions there. Jennifer Valley's going to take over for 2 minutes, and I'll be right back with Story Smash. Thanks, you guys.